G&T show is intended for mature audiences. Parental discussion is advice. Live long and prosper, bitches.
Are friends with benefits?
Speaking of having a good time, Terry.
Dayton broke the G&T show. This is now the David Mack
Appreciation Hour. You assholes.
What is it about this guy that people love him so much?
With his purple velvet cape and his crown. I thought it was a little much when he had us carry him in the studio on a throne.
I am awesome! Look what I have done! Look what I have brought upon the world!
There is an urge to go nya 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 nya.
I heard rumors that you might be working on something else, but we won't pry much. I was going to say,
I'm going to pry a little.
Dare you! How dare you ask me to change it? Do you not understand the majesty of my genius? And the guy sitting next to me looked at me like he was, like I'd crapped in his hat.
Yeah, it's the professionalism that sells the show. That's right.
And welcome to another edition of G&T Supplemental Logs. There she is sitting to my left, your right, looking resplendent in her Little Santa's elf helper costume, Terry Lynn.
Hi.
And there he is, looking resplendent in his Klingon Christmas Carol regalia, Ceridium.
Kapla. Hello.
And our special guest this week, we had him on from the Star Trek Las Vegas convention, author of These Are the Voyages, Season 1, an amazing 5-star book about the first season of Star Trek. That's why I would say Season 1. Mr. Marc Cushman.
How are you? Not only the first season, but the first series.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yep.
Of the Star Trek. Welcome back. It's great to have you back again. We were so pleased to meet you in Las Vegas that, how's it been since we saw you last? How have you been?
Oh, fantastic. I've been working on book 2, and matter of fact, it goes off to the printers in about a week, so I can break for Christmas. And so I had a great time at the convention there. That was my first. I was a virgin. And,
That was your first convention.
Yes, and actually that's not true. I forget, but I went to one of the very first conventions up in San Francisco in 1975, I think.
Wow.
And I was delivering film to it of episodes of Star Trek to be aired. And I remember meeting Arlene Martell and James Doohan and Walter Koenig and a few others. And but I spent so little time on the floor that I didn't really remember it. It was more backroom type stuff. So this is my first time at being out there and soaking it all up and having a great time. And it was fantastic.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it because I think the fandom's really kind of burgeoning again, and it's always really fun to see how they celebrate Star Trek out on the floor of the convention, that's for sure.
Well, I wasn't surprised by this, but my publisher was, because my publisher doesn't know diddly about Star Trek, other than they wanted the book, and they thought the book was good. Since then, this particular publisher has got to know the show quite a bit from reading the book. But he kept coming up to me in the convention and he kept saying, I've never been surrounded by so many nice and intelligent people in my life. And he was shocked by this. And I said, Star Trek is a very intelligent show and it had very positive themes. So it only makes sense that the people who are into Star Trek and the various Star Treks kind of carry on those ideals. But he was surprised by all that. And it was interesting to be with somebody like that for me. It was kind of like experiencing Christmas through the eyes of a child.
It's true. It's
Right
true. I was also lucky enough to have a friend who had never experienced a Star Trek convention, and he had done one of those, a list of 50 things to do before he turned 50. And so my challenge to him was to attend his first Star Trek convention, and he came away with it. He came away from it just in love. He just loved it. He had a great time. Again,
That was Mike, right?
Yeah, that was Mike. And
Awesome.
he again, same thing. He got to meet so many different new people, all of whom just, not only had a shared passion over a great television show, but also were all very kind and friendly and intelligent. And he was like, okay, I get it now. I get it. And
but you learned from him too, because that's why it says like watching a kid experience
Right.
Christmas. We take it for granted. I grew up with Joe, and it did influence the way I look at the world. But to be with somebody who really only saw a couple episodes in his life, and then suddenly he's getting turned on by the stimulation of the people that are there and the activity, and then since then has been reading the book and watching episodes. So that's kind of fun for me to find out.
That's great.
That is
awesome. That's very cool. Well, Nick, you've got some questions I know for Mark about the first book, and then we can talk a little bit about the next book that's coming out.
Yes. Now there's a kind of a director's cut edition coming out of the first book. Is that correct?
That's a good way to say it. We have a revised, expanded edition that is being released on Friday in hardback. It's actually out now in Kindle and paperback, not only in the U.S. but around the world in about a dozen different countries. And the hardbacks were a little later coming because that takes longer from the printers. So those will be at Amazon, I think, on Friday, and they'll be at Jake Brown on Friday, and I'm supposed to have some arriving here on Friday too. But the reason for that is, the first edition was rushed out for the August show where we met you, and so it needed one more proofing. I'm going to admit, and anybody who's read it probably caught a few things, because it's 600 and something pages.
It's a big book.
Oh my God, there's a lot of words, and so you're occasionally going to goof, and so there's a few little things in there that we caught and we wanted to clean up. I wanted to get a different type of a cover design going, but the main reason, those were personally for me, but the main reason is Leonard Nimoy contacted me. A lot of people contacted me who gave me additional information, additional interviews, additional documents, additional photographs, things of that nature. And so I talked to the publisher and I said, look, you owe me a revised second run on this because you guys let Stakes look through. And I think you can do a little better on that cover too. And I said, so can I put in some more interviews and some more documents and some more pictures? And they said, well, if we're doing a revised run, we might as well. And so the new version is actually 80 pages bigger. It's now 680 pages.
Wow.
And clean as can be. 3 proofers went through that thing. I love the cover, the new cover. Now, and so if you have the old book, think of it this way. That's a first edition. You're never going to see that again. So hopefully you'll think of that as a collector's item.
And we have a signed first edition.
There you go. But for those people who said it wasn't enough, 600 pages just wasn't enough, well, now you got a little bit more. And then the second book will be out in a couple months, and that's coming in probably around 550 pages for the second season alone.
Wow, amazing. Now, for those people who haven't had the opportunity to read or get their hands on the first book, regardless of which edition, let's talk a little bit about what These Are the Voyages is. What brought you to be able to write the book, and what is the book derived from?
Well, I was a fan of the show when I was a kid, and that's the show that made me want to become a screenwriter. And I was watching it when it was on NBC, and I was like 9, 10, 11 years old. And but it caught my imagination. I believed the characters, so it really just inspired me to want to write type of stories you could tell, stories you can't tell in other formats. And back then, there wasn't a lot of science fiction on television. You had Lost in Space, and that was about it. You had some anthologies like The Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, but as far as continuing characters, so I'd watch an episode like The Naked Time that John B.F. Black wrote. He did the foreword on the book, and he's a good friend of mine. And he that episode alone, just using that as an example, them getting this disease, which they become uninhibited, and they show their real side. He says it's like getting drunk without slurs, but you get to see that Kirk is in love with his ship and admits it, and the torment that he feels, and the tortured character that he truly is when his guard is up. You get to see Spock crying over the relationship he didn't have with his mother. You get to see Sulu's passion for being a swashbuckler. All these things. Now, you can't do that in a detective show or a hospital show, unless you're going to have the people get drunk.
Yeah.
Who wants to sit around and watch a bunch of people get drunk? So it's really the things you can do in science fiction is just amazing. And that's what caught my fancy and made me want to write. Well, I came to Los Angeles, started writing for TV, and I got the opportunity. I was working for a production company, and they wanted to do a special on Star Trek. They knew I liked Star Trek, so they sent me down to meet Gene Roddenberry at Paramount and interview him. This was in 1982. And he gave me, he showed me all his files, 70 boxes of all the memos and everything. And I said, my God, I read Making a Star Trek when I was a kid. And I said, but look what you got. I mean, what was in that book was nothing. Are you ever going to put more of this stuff out? And he said, no, I saved it so somebody else would put it out. And he invited me to do it. Well, I was just getting started in TV, and it was a full-time demanding career. So it wasn't really until several years ago that I was able to break away and take the time time to start going through all this stuff, and it took 8 months just to go through the box. And I'm a workaholic. I mean, I'll do it from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. So 8 months of just going through boxes and of all the memos and the script drafts and just reading everything. And then it took me the better part of 6 years to write these 3 books, doing additional research, conducting additional interviews, of course, watching the episodes.
Required.
That's the great thing about writing a book. It gives you an excuse to watch those episodes again.
Yeah.
So that was the reason. I read The Making of Star Trek and I was hungry for more. I wanted to know why certain episodes got made and why some were so good and some not so. Why did the alternative factor not turn out great? Whose choice was it to make? We're jumping ahead to another season, but the way to Eden, have the hippies singing. What were they thinking? Because these are guys, men and women, mostly men, but a few women like Dorothy Fontana and Margaret Arman and Judy Burns and the others who had such a great track record, quality. But occasionally there'd be an episode that would kind of limp along the cross finish line. So I wanted to know, what were you guys thinking? Well, the memos tell you. The show files tell you, because they all talk to each other in these memos. And you'll hear them saying what they like about this script and what they don't like and what they're trying to change and what they can't change because of the budget. And you've read book 1 now, so you know the story about the alternate factor. And what's fun is in book 2, you'll hear them talking about that. Dorothy Fontana writing to Gene Kuhn and saying, with Mir, we like this, but we have to be careful because we don't want this to become another alternative factor. And you know what we all thought of that one. And you see them writing about that and you go, okay, that episode didn't work for them. Well, why did it get made? Well, because they had to make it. They had to start filming next week. They didn't have another script ready.
Time pressures must have been enormous.
Yeah, you just can't go dark. And I mean, they got it much easier these days where you make, 10 episodes a year for HBO and have a couple weeks to shoot. But they had to shoot an episode in 6-7 days and no days off. They were back the day after Thanksgiving shooting, things like that, so you're scheduled to work next week, you're working. And if the script isn't at what you want it to be, you got to shoot it anyway.
One of the things that I love about your book is, because of your book, I was yelling at the TV a couple of weeks ago. Let me explain. I was watching a show, it's called Comic Book Men, hosted by Kevin Smith, the author and director and writer and actor and all of that, and they were talking about conventions, things like that, and they talked about the popularity of Star Trek, and he said, as is the popular misconception about that it was low rated even from the word go, but reading These Are the Voyages, the way you even break down how it did on first run and then the ones that they chose to repeat and how that did. So I thought that was a really fascinating thing to see how the numbers were, that there were weeks they were winning their time slot outright.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this Vegas, but I was trying to get those ratings for quite a long time because when I was watching as a kid, I didn't know anybody who wasn't watching the show. You'd go to school, the teachers wouldn't give you any homework that night because it was Star Trek night. And
that's cool.
And my dad loved it because the parents were watching us with the kids controlled TV dials. Back then, most houses had one TV set, and so everybody watched the same thing. And so I couldn't believe it when I kept reading that NBC said the ratings weren't good and they were going to cancel the show. And of course, then they'd receive 100,000 protest letters, so they would renew it and they'd move it to a worse time slot. And they played this game for 3 straight years until they finally got rid of it. But I never believed it, or I thought Nielsen didn't know what they were doing. Who are they calling? What people are they calling? They're sure not calling my family. Well, Nielsen did know what they were doing, and the numbers are good. It was really a dispute between Gene Roddenberry and NBC. NBC wanted to get rid of Roddenberry. If you've got a maverick producer who's not getting along with you, you don't want to keep their show on the air. Now, if it's a number 1 rated show, you're going to just bite the bullet and keep it. But if it's a show that's in the middle of the ratings, you might normally renew, but in this case you won't because you want to get rid of the guy. When its first season on Thursday nights, as you saw, it was NBC's top-rated show, according to Nielsen, and according to TVQ and Arbitron. And I got all the ratings and all the surveys from all the different sources. And it was more Thursday nights than not, it was NBC's top-rated show, and quite often it won a time slot. Usually it came in number 2nd. I think there was only a couple times during the entire year where it came in 3rd, and it was a super close race.
And you point out that's because back then, when we only had basically the 3 channels, a movie like Lawrence of Arabia or something would be playing opposite it, and that would just draw phenomenal numbers because
that would get clobbered, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but if that wasn't on, if they had just a run-of-the-mill movie, they were still very popular. You had no Netflix, no HBO, no Blockbuster down the street, which we won't have pretty soon anyway. And so movies on TV were a big draw. The network movies usually were among the top-rated shows of the week. And so on Thursday nights, it was up against the CBS Thursday night movie, and on Fridays, when they moved it, the CBS Friday night movie. And that's tough competition. But also on Thursday night, it was up against ABC's #1 rated series, their top show, Bewitched, which the year before had been the second highest rated show on TV. And quite often, Star Trek is beating Bewitched in the rating. Now, so we've been told 40-something years that this show was a failure on NBC. We haven't been told the truth. And nobody's ever bothered to check into these statements. There's a lot of folklore out there, not just about the ratings, but about a lot of things. Well, I tried to get the ratings, and Nielsen told me they didn't have them. He said, we don't keep ratings from 45 years ago. There's no money to be made on that for us. I called the television art scientists, sciences. They didn't have it. I called the Museum of Broadcasting. They didn't have them. I called NBC. They didn't have them. I finally called Nielsen back, I think the third or fourth time I called them. I kept hoping somebody would tell me differently, so I kept calling over a period of a year or so as I was writing these books, doing the research. And I got, for some reason, I asked it differently last time I called. I didn't say, please, can you help me? Do you have these ratings? I called up and said, hi, I would like to license the rating from 1966 through 1969 from Thursday and Friday nights. And they said, okay. And they switched me over to somebody, and it was done.
Wow.
They had them. It's just, they're not going to give them to you. They're not going to go down in their basement and dig this stuff up. But if you're going to license it, they're going to go get it. And in 45 years, nobody had asked to license these ratings.
I'll be darned.
Wow. It's all about how you ask.
Yeah, well, but I'll tell your listeners, you don't want to do it. You're better off to buy the book and you'll have all the ratings.
There you go. Yay.
It's a lot cheaper. As a matter of fact, buy that revised version because I still need to get recouped for those ratings.
And something else that because of your book, I had a whole new, let's just say, appreciation. A couple of weeks ago, Terry and I found something. You ever get on YouTube and you start out looking for like something, let's say you're looking for news footage of a plane crash. I'm just throwing that out there, and it's horrible, I know. But 45 minutes later, you're looking at YouTube videos on how to oil your chainsaw because YouTube can just suck you in like that. Well, I came across from Tom Snyder from 1976, The Tomorrow Show with DeForest Kelley, Walter Koenig, and James Doohan.
And Harlan Ellison at the last part of the
Yes, cranky Harlan Ellison. And Terry and I were talking about that on the show about just, wow, having read your book and seen those memos and then seeing his still crankiness about that whole thing was just kind of amazing.
Yeah, Harlan's a very interesting person. I like Harlan a lot. And he called not too long ago. And one of those typos we had to clean up in the book was, he calls up and he says, Mark, I saw his name on the phone. So I immediately braced myself. Oh my God, Harlan Ellison's calling.
Hurricane Harlan.
You're in trouble now, Cushman. And I picked up the phone because I sent him a copy of the book. So and I pick it up and I say, hi, Harlan. He says, Mark, I want to tell you something. I'm not going to call the book, what was the word he used? Awesome. Yeah, I think. Yeah, he said, I'm not going to call the book awesome because that's a word I reserve for Eleanor Donahue and the Grand Canyon. But it comes close. But Mark?
Wow.
Wow.
He says, but Mark? And I said, yes, Harlan. He says, it's Edith Keeler, not Edith Kessler. And I know that, but, my fingers didn't know it at that particular when I hit that key. And so at one point in the book, it says Edith Kessler, and of course the proofreader didn't catch it. It's been caught now. It's been cleaned up now for Mr. Ellison.
Yay.
But he was fine with it. I was scared to death because I put in there, you read the making of that episode in book, and you see the feud, and you hear everybody has their say. I let Harlan have his say, but I let the others have theirs as well. And there's some very colorful remarks being made. And you saw how I intercut the quote, so it's like you're sitting in a room surrounded by all these people, hearing Harlan talking and Gene Roddenberry yelling back at him and Dorothy Fontana speaking and Gene Coon speaking. And it's like you're in the middle of a room as they're all having a debate.
You're the fly on the wall.
Yeah. And so you never know how people are going to react, but he was fine. He liked it. And I got a email from Shimon Winselberg's daughter. Now, Shimon wrote Dagger of the Mind and Galileo 7. And if you remember the chapter on Dagger of the Mind, Shimon had a big falling out with Gene Roddenberry and wrote him a very upset upset letter, and Roddenberry scribbled F him across the letter, and that's all in the book, and you see it all. And their memos on Shimon's scripts are not very kind. I think John Black said it seems like something he had it in the trunk of his car for a year and brought in to us or something. And so I get this email from Shimon's daughter, who's a writer herself now, novelist, and she said she loved it, and she said thank you. And I wrote her back, and I said it didn't hurt your feelings because I'm a little worried about that. And she says no, you printed my father's letter, you let him have his say, and that was great.
Oh, that's great.
I can't see how people could be like Harlan Ellison or like that. It's their own words doing the talking back and forth, so it's not you putting words in anybody's mouth.
You're just telling the truth of the history of it.
Yeah. No, Nick, you're right. I'm glad you said that because, Walter Koenig agreed to do the foreword for book 2, which is great because that's where his character enters the story. And he said it's because he read book 1 and he said he trusted me. And, he said you're the first writer I've ever met who I trust, with my quote, trust to tell my story. And it's because I wanted to tell the truth. I mean, I love the show. I didn't have an agenda to make Roddenberry right or wrong or make Shatner right or wrong or anybody else. My agenda was all these guys are amazingly talented, but they're human beings. They all have good days, bad days. They all have egos. Sometimes there'll be an agreement. Sometimes they'll be fighting to the tooth and nail on story elements or who's going to get the close-up or whatever. And that's just entertainment. That's actors and writers and directors the way it is. That's the life I've lived for 4 years now. So
have you heard from Eugene Roddenberry at all?
Yeah, Rod Roddenberry. Yeah, he. I interviewed him for the book, and he's one of the ones who made a comment about Harlan thought Harlan had been very rude with some of the things he'd said about his dad. No, he says the book is the Bible of Star Trek, something he's going to keep near his side for the rest of his life and use in his business as well.
That's great.
Because it is. You really get to walk through the production of every single episode. But what I was saying before is that I felt like a reporter here. I got all the memos and I did all the interviews and I got all the documents and I just kind of put them all together. I think of myself.
Tell itself.
I think of myself as a clutch pedal. I'm there to get you from first gear to second and third.
That's a great analogy. What I appreciate about the book and the way that you've outlined everything is not just telling a story and a unique story for each episode as well. There's always a different point of view, but it's also a great primer for a lot of the fans who may not be so familiar with how production in Hollywood actually works. And the fact is that your book not only outlines it, it kind of goes into the gory details of it. And a lot of people, I think, will be enlightened by the process, not just back in the 60s when they made the original series, but also how that became the foundation of how things operate today.
Yeah, it is the same today. And it goes back to what I believe, Nick, you said it a minute ago when you asked if I'd heard from Rod Roddenberry. Rod thanked me said thank you for not making my dad out to be some kind of a god or a saint. He made him out to be who he really was, which was a guy who was good, but he had his faults like most people. But you see his genius. We've always heard about Gene Roddenberry's genius, but we get to see it. Like in Mud's Women, when he's dictating that memo to John B.F. Black, saying, here's how the teaser and act 1 of the script should go. And Gene Roddenberry was just sitting there at midnight, probably having a cocktail after, 16, 17-hour day, dictating this memo, and he lays these scenes out exactly as they would end up playing in the show. And John Black ended up writing them that way.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, not Stephen Cadell, but John Black. So you get to see his genius, but at the same time, you get to see him write F him across a memo from Shimon Winselberg. So you get to see that this guy was a cop, he was a pilot, he's got emotion. He's got emotion. He's a human being.
Yeah.
And I came away from reading that first book, and I got to tell you, and Terry can tell you, I called Terry when I finished it because I finished it before her, and I said, I want the second book.
Yeah, he did.
Because one thing I came away with was a far deeper understanding of the genius of Gene's ability to rewrite or flesh something out. That was pretty amazing. And the second was, I was exhausted for John Black by the time he left.
and you understood why he left, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, till 2 a.m. in the morning, and then back in the office at 9. It's funny, you've got all the script drafts and the story outline drafts in there. You got all the dates of everything. And so you start reading about Mud's Women, and it'll show you all the various drafts as it goes through it, and then you read what the memos and everything else. But if you look from one chapter to the next, and it's a different chapter for each episode, as you all know, but you look from one chapter to the next, and you look at those dates, these things are overlapping. I mean, while they're working on 10 scripts at once, with 10 outlines coming in the next day on the next 10 scripts, and doing the third draft of this one, the second draft draft of that one, first draft of this one, all simultaneously. So imagine how tired your brain must be when you're working like that every day. It's not like you're coming in and working on one script that day and say, well, I just did a polish on The Enemy Within, and tomorrow I'm going to come in and do a polish on Charlie X. No, you're working on one for a few hours, and then you're working on another, and then you're reading another and leaving notes, and then you're reading Bob Justman's notes on something from yesterday, and all this is just going back and forth, and you read all this, and you realize why at the end of each season, everybody was going into hospitals with nervous breakdown, and why they would change producers of it.
Interesting.
When we saw you in Las Vegas, you and I talked after the show, and I was telling you what a huge fan. We even talked about Mark Leonard on the show because I'm such a fan of the Romulans. I just have to let you know, since then, I have gotten a Romulan tattoo.
And where did you get it?
It's on my leg.
I meant, did you get it in Vegas? No, I'm joking.
No, I got it here in Maryland. But yeah, no.
It's on your leg. That's great. Mark Leonard was fantastic. You know, I'm the guy who pitched Sarah in Gene Roddenberry. And I did that because I liked Mark Leonard, and I knew he was now at the age where he looked like he was supposed to look. They made him look older in the first show. They put powder in his hair to make it look gray. And I said, now Mark Leonard's kind of caught up with where he's supposed to be. We ought to bring him back. He was fantastic.
Yeah, he was.
Awesome.
One of the most amazing episodes in Star Trek, I think.
Oh, yeah. Balanced Hair? Yeah, absolutely. And Journey to Babel, too. Both of them are two of my favorites.
Balanced Hair and Sarek, so.
Sarek.
They're all in the top 10 for me. So.
Well, I was rewritten heavily. Peter Beagle ended up getting the teleplay credit on my script. Gene called me and he said, "You love that first show." And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he says, "Because it's paced like the first show." He said, "We're going to have to have it rewritten." And I said, "Go ahead. I don't care. I'm still getting paid for the story, right?" And I said, "Yeah."
What was it, as a writer, what was the difference in the pacing of the show then? Was it because of less time because of commercials?
No, if you watch the first couple of years of Next Generation, it changed after Gene stepped down and Mike Piller came in and Rick Berman came in and so forth. But the first 3 seasons, are the pacing is pretty slow. Where Star Trek, here's the difference. The first Star Trek was action adventure. It didn't even say sci-fi in TV Guide. It said drama. It was nominated for an Emmy its first 2 seasons as Best Dramatic Series. But NBC bought it and built it as action adventure in space. Where Next Generation was science fiction, and it was very intellectual science fiction. It wasn't action adventure. Occasionally they might do an episode that was paced that way, but most of the stuff was a lot of talking, a lot of intellectual concepts and things like that. So I love the action adventure aspect of the original Star Trek, and where a lot of that came from now from reading the book from NBC. Stan Robertson would send memos in and say, "This is too slow. We need more action here. We need something bigger in the teaser." So NBC was always prompting Roddenberry to accelerate the pacing and so forth. And you see as it goes into its second season, Star Trek becomes a lot more fast-paced in the second year than from the first, so forth. Third year slows down a bit in the pacing, but it's only because the budget was so tight that Bob Justman, there's a few memos you're going to be amazed to read during the third season where Bob Justman's saying things like, if this keeps going with the budgets being cut, we're going to be doing a 50-minute episode in the briefing room where they tell us what the plot was. Because that's all we'll be able to afford to shoot.
Oh, I know. I can't wait. One episode I'm looking forward to reading about is The Empath.
That was Gene Roddenberry's favorite episode of the entire series. Bob Justman found that. Joyce Muscat, who I interviewed, she's never been interviewed. I tracked her down. I found her and interviewed her. And I also interviewed John Ehrman, who's never given an interview, who directed that episode. But Justman found that script. It was sent in on spec from a writer with no credit. And he brought it to Fred Freeberger, and they bought it. Roddenberry loved it.
And it's so minimalist that, and it's so fitting for those budget cuts and everything, but it works.
Yeah, it's stylistic. And again, it's got a great theme. I mean, really about, they're seeing if she is willing to give her life for another person. If she has the instinct of self-sacrifice in her, because they can only save one planet and they have to choose. And, so they want to find out, they want to save the race that's the most deserving. That's a really wonderful, sensitive, intellectual premise. And, I think the third season's gotten a bad rap because, especially after doing the research I did and watching the episodes again as I was writing the book, I thought there are some great concepts in here. The budget had been cut so horribly and so many people had left the show from the creative team because of exhaustion that it wasn't as good as second year. But here's the funny thing, you guys. If you had never seen Star Trek before, none of it, and you sat down and started watching the third season of the first series, you'd probably like it a lot. And then watch the second season season and the third. You know, the problem was we were so spoiled from the first two seasons that we were disappointed in the third because it didn't quite reach the level.
From the third season, I love Spectre of the Gun.
Oh, one of my favorite episodes, yeah.
Yeah, again, you could see where the budget cuts were, but the budget cuts helped that episode, I think.
It is, because, well, you know, budget cuts, right in the beginning, the budgets are what brought about some of the best ideas in Star Trek, starting with the transporter.
Right.
They couldn't afford to have the miniature of the ship land on a planet. That would have blown the budget, as Gene said. So he had to come up with a way to get them down to the planet back, and NBC wanted things to happen fast, so in order to make it happen fast for the network and in order to save money for the studio, they came up with the transporter. So yeah, sometimes when you're stuck in a situation where you don't have a lot of money, you have to really think out of the box. And Spectre of the Gun is a great example of that, and so is The Empath. And I'll tell you, from being a director and writer in television, I think some of the best things I've ever done and some of the best things I've ever seen had small budgets. I think sometimes the worst thing that can happen to a movie is to have too big of a budget.
Ooh.
Carrie, we won't mention J.J. Abrams then.
And we won't say a thing.
That's an interesting statement,
Well,
though.
We like it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be very, very true.
Well, that's what Nick Myers had to do with Star Trek 2.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You know why, guys? Because it's that story is about character. And when you have, thank you.
The crowd just cheered.
You're preaching to the choir here.
And when you have too much money, what are you going to do? You're going to make a big movie. But the bigger the movie gets, smaller the characters get.
Yeah, and the bigger the explosions get.
Yeah. So it's less time dealing with the people and more time dealing with the special effects. So you're right. With Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they had a big budget, and we got these long scenes of shuttling around the Enterprise and flying through V'ger. Then they come along and do Wrath of Khan, and the budget's half, and it's a better movie. Well, gee.
Well, I want to ask you this then, because the book that's the next book that will be coming out, the season 2 book, Wrath of Khan. Space Seed is in season 2, which of course led to Wrath of Khan. I would be remiss, I feel, if it wasn't asked, what was your opinion of Into Darkness basically retelling Wrath of Khan without needing Khan? They could have left it as John Harrison.
Okay, well, first of all, I found that movie and the one before that very, very entertaining. I enjoyed it. And I like the fact that my son, who's 19 now, got turned on to Star Trek when he was 16 because that first movie came out by J.J. Abrams. And he came in and he said, Dad, he saw the movie. And he comes in and he says, hey, Dad, I've been watching that show you're writing the book about. It's on 5 nights a week here in L.A. And so I've been watching it. I said, really? He says, yeah, it's pretty good. After I watch it, I find myself thinking about it for 10, 15 minutes each episode.
Wow.
Oh.
So I love that Paramount has reinvigorated the franchise, gone back to these great characters, which for me were the best characters because they were the most flawed. And flawed characters are the most interesting, starting with Gene Roddenberry and then the characters he created. You know, if Kirk wasn't flawed, if Spock wasn't flawed, didn't have that inner conflict, he wouldn't be interesting. You can't beat that. You really can't. And so I like that they've done that. Do I like it as much as the original show? Not at all. Because look, first of all, I think the actors are all very, very good. Yeah. And I like that they work in the balance of humor and drama and science fiction and all the things that the writers of Star Trek so brilliantly did in 50 minutes with all those episodes. But I don't like the fact that a lot of movies these days tend to throw people all the way across the room up against a steel wall, and the person gets up and he comes right back into the fight when every bone in his body would have been broken. So it's kind of like comic books, and not the whole movie, but certain sequences. And they're great sequences. Visually, they're fantastic. But when you see that, how do you switch gears and get back into believing in these characters? Now, somehow they do, because I was a little teary-eyed when they were doing the Wrath of Khan type scene of I shall always be your friend. I got a little choked up watching that. So apparently it worked. They're pulling it off. But, if you can just keep the characters totally real, to me, then it works all the much better. So I'm always going to love that first show because, to me, those characters are real.
I love it. And I don't disagree with you. And I've always given, I gave them ratings, when I watched the films, and I gave them like 8 out of 10. I thought, you know what, this was a great popcorn film. I walked away from it feeling like I had a great time. And you know what, for a big summer blockbuster film, you can't ask for much more than that. You really can't.
No.
Well, personally, you can, but I want perfection, damn it. But they weren't. They just didn't, they just didn't call home to me the way that the characters in the original series did. I like my heroes flawed, yes, but not so flawed as to reward somebody who's a jerk. So I didn't like the Kirk in the new movie because I always grew up with my Kirk as a guy who busted his ass in school to get where he was. Young, yes, but he studied hard.
Yeah,
A computer with legs, isn't that what
He was.
called him?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he was a hero, truly.
Right.
Where the new guy is just a lucky bastard. and you have fun with him, but you're right. You wouldn't want your sister marrying him, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And you know something else. My girlfriend was with me when we went and saw the new movie.
Uh-huh.
And I'm divorced, so I have a girlfriend. And marriage is behind me, and goodbye. So anyway, we watched thing, and in the movie they had a tribble. They didn't make a big deal about it, but you saw a tribble.
Right.
And she turns to me and she says, "Was that a tribble?" And I said, "You've never seen the Trouble with Tribbles?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, you're going to tonight." Well, we walk out of that movie, and she just loved it to death. As I did. You're right. It was a great ride. It was
fun. A great ride.
I went and saw it the second time. I enjoyed it so much. But anyway, we come back here, and I put on the Trouble with Tribbles, and at the end of it, she said a very, very interesting thing that I hadn't really even thought about. I don't know why, but I hadn't. And she said, first of all, she kept talking about how handsome Chapman was. My God, he's beautiful. He looks great. And then the second thing is, at the end of it, she said, "I believe him. He's old enough to be a captain. He's in his mid-30s. Yep. The other guy looks like he's in his mid-20s."
Yep. Mm-hmm. And you got that's exactly right. I believed in the Kirk character's existence, the potential for his existence far more than the other stuff. But that doesn't. Again, I don't want to diss the movie too much because I've already made like half a career out of that. But
But we've all admitted we liked it.
Yes,
I did. We all did.
But then we script doctored it.
Then we script doctored it. That's right. But I have a question for you with regards to the original series, and now that you've had the opportunity to kind of live with these people through their memos and through their notes and recollections, and even the interviews that you've done, what do you think might have been, in your opinion only, what was Gene's biggest mistake?
Oh, gee, well, you're not going to ask me an easy question, are you? Gene's biggest mistake during the making of the show was letting Gene Coon go. Well, you won't find that out until book 2. I don't want to give away some of the great stuff in book 2 because nobody's ever really explained what happened between the two Genes and why Gene Coon left the series halfway through the second season. But you're going to find out in book 2, and completely find out. You're going to live there, and you're going to live in what happens with Lucy and Desi Lou. In book 1, you kept saying that, seeing the board of directors kept saying, "Don't make this show." Even after NBC bought it, and they'd spent all the money on the 2 pilots, and NBC buys it, and the board of directors tries to talk Lucy out of doing it. Nobody's ever not made a series once the network says they want it, but Desi Lou tried to talk her into not making it. Well, you're going to in book 2, she loses her studio. She goes broke because of Star Trek, and it's really sad. But you'll read it, and you'll feel what she was feeling. You'll hear her quotes and what she had to say about it. But you also find out what happened between the two Genes. And it's a shame because Gene Coon brought a lot of good things into Star Trek and a lot of warmth between those characters. That was the other thing missing from the 3rd season. It doesn't make the 3rd season bad, as we all agreed. There's some excellent episodes there. I like Is There in Truth No Beauty as well, and All Our Yesterdays and a few others. There's quite a few very good episodes. Yes, absolutely. And you're going to find out about that being the Pueblo that was being written as the Pueblo was taken by the North Koreans, and that's why Dorothy Fontana said, "Let's do an episode where the Enterprise is taken by the Romulans," for the same reason, and it becomes the same type of a thing. So they were taking stories right out of the headline. But the humor isn't in the 3rd season. The warmth between the characters is missing because Fontana was gone and Coon were gone, and they were the two who were putting that in. If you look at the first 16 episodes of season 1, there's not a lot of humor. They're great episodes, and Gene Roddenberry wrote every one of them. He rewrote them, even if it says Jerry Soule on the screen or anybody else. Gene Roddenberry was doing the final drafts of those scripts and did more than a 50% dialogue rewrite on every one of them. So it's his word. And they're good words, but there's not much humor. And that's fine. But once the humor element was introduced into the show and the characters started to warm up to each other, you can't go back to them being formal to each other. So that's why I said it's almost good to watch the 3rd season first. Because once they get chummy, it kind of feels weird that they're not friendly again. So that was lost. And I think that was Gene's biggest mistake. Well, his other one, it was not getting along with NBC. And that's why Star Trek went off the air. Not because of the ratings. ratings, but because of the relationship between Roddenberry and the network. So those were his two mistakes.
Fantastic.
One thing I came away after reading book one was I would not want to have sat across table from Lucille Ball in a negotiation. Wow, she was quite the businesswoman.
Yeah, she was. And she was called herself one tough broad. I don't know if it's in book one or book two, but Joe D'Agostino has a great quote that he gave to me when I interviewed him about when he got the job, so it must be in book one, to be the casting director for Star Trek as well as Mission Impossible and The Lucy Show, which were the 3 studio-owned series. And she would talk about herself in the third person. And she said, she says, Lucy is a big woman, and I don't want you hiring women who are skinnier than her, smaller than her, making her look big and all this kind of stuff. And so she's talking about herself as Lucy, right? And Joe D'Agostino looks at her and he says, if I'm remembering the line right, he looks at her and he says, well, how would Lucy feel about me hiring a woman who's more beautiful than she is? And Lucy looks at him and says, bring them on, I'll eat them up, or I'll eat them alive. Yeah, she was a dynamite character, but a great one. Again, when you read book two and you see when she had to sell the studio and she runs away to Miami Beach so they can't find her because she doesn't want to sign the contracts. I mean, this is the studio that she and her husband built, and he's gone. This is all she has left of I Love Lucy, all she has left of her marriage, and she's losing it because she gave us Star Trek. No?
Wow.
Amazing story, and I'm really looking forward to reading more about it. When can we expect book two out again, maybe?
Well, you can expect pretty soon. I think they're going to have ebook review copies ready to go out right after January 1st. So contact the publisher, and you can be the first kids on the block to read it. And so Michael looked happy there. And so when will everybody else be able to get it? Late February, right around March 1st. I think the publisher will be pre-selling it throughout February. So it will be at Jacobs Brown Press.
Right.
Or just Google These Are the Voyages of Marc Cushman, and it'll be one of the first links that comes up. You just click that.
And not the least, everybody, just so you know, I'm sorry to cut you off, Mark, but just for everybody who may not know that These Are the Voyages also has a Twitter account, which is These Are Voyages. So it's @ These Are Voyages. So you can follow them on Twitter.
And you'll be notified when it's available. They'll be pre-selling it, and you'll get them before it ever even goes to Amazon. And they'll be autographed, as the new ones will be autographed by me and John Black, and the other one by me and Kurt Koenig. So you can get it first, and you can get it with autographs, but Amazon should have it around March 1st for the people who want to get it there.
Fantastic. And all of our listeners know that if you're going to pre-order this book through Amazon, when it does become available, you have one job. And your job is to go one job only, and that is to go to the G&T Show website first, and then click on the Amazon link on the right-hand side of our website, because we get a small donation back to help support our servers and our show from Amazon.
Fantastic. Good.
Yay. Nick, you have other questions?
No, I'm just looking very forward to this.
Me too.
Terry will tell you I was immersed in it. Usually I'm reading 2 or 3 books at a time. That was the only thing I read at the time. I took it to work. I read it during lunch, so I'm definitely looking forward to book 2.
Yeah, and Amazon's a friendly partner of yours and does that. I'll mention, they've got the ebook Kindle. They've got it exclusively, and they're doing a matchbook on that. So if you bought the book and you want to see the revised draft, you can get it for matchbook pricing, whatever that means. And I guess click your emblem and they'll make that donation again.
Oh, cool.
Fantastic.
Very cool.
That's wonderful news.
Mike, do you have anything?
Yeah.
I've just been sitting here just smiling and tears running down my face. I mean, just hearing all of these
You are the
stories
most emotional Klingon I have ever...
Klingons are passionate.
You make Alexander look like Martok, okay?
I just think it's all fantastic. I mean, just hearing all of the stories and everything. I mean, I'm just sitting here just amazed, and I'm so glad that we have had the opportunity to sit down and talk with you and getting to hear these stories.
Will we see you at the convention again this year?
Yeah. Are you kidding? I had so much fun last time. How can I not come out?
Awesome. Great. So we can add Marc Cushman to the list.
Even if they don't have a booth, I'll be there. I'll come sit at your booth. And
okay.
By the way, there's an excerpt for book 2 out right now in the new issue of Geek Magazine. You can read about the production of Who Mourns for Adonis.
Oh.
Awesome.
Did you happen to see the Star Trek Continues? That was the sequel to that.
I love it. Man, was that good. With Michael Forrest?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I just read the script to the next one they're going to make and gave them notes on it.
Very nice. Lucky dog.
It's a well done show. And what I loved about that was, again, it had great theme and it had great feeling screen. And you get choked up watching that thing. It's great science fiction, but the characters really grab you. And boy, was that a terrific twist ending.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that, Mike, help me out.
The Kurt character, Vic Magnolia?
Yeah, Vic Magnolia.
Yeah.
Vic.
Sorry, Vic.
Sorry, Vic.
Sorry, Vic.
Vic captured Kirk so brilliantly without being a caricature.
I told him the same thing. I was kind of gushing in one of my emails to him because I said, and you wear that shirt so well.
Yeah.
He looks as good as Shatner looked in that shirt. He's really got the nuances. There's some camera angles that'll go to a camera angle and he looks so much like Shatner. It's remarkable. Same thing with Chris Doohan. Like he's channeling his dad.
Oh, it's amazing.
Pardati. And, but Vic, my God, his delivery, his mannerism, his posture. Yeah. Thank you. As he kind of walks across the bridge, a little bit of a swagger. Really, it's an excellent, I told him, I said, I think you're doing a better job than the guy in the movies,
Is this
Agreed.
We're talking about Star Trek Continues, are we not?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And that's the one that Tom Hanks talked about today?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, there was a video. There's a video floating around Facebook. I was going to say FaceTube. Facebook.
Yeah, there's a video of Tom Hanks talking about Continues.
Yeah, he's just ecstatic.
Link that.
I'll have to find it.
Yeah. And Chris Pine, if you would like to come on and talk about your differences in playing Captain Kirk compared to Vic, we would be more than happy to host you for that. Young thing, you.
They can have an arm wrestling contest. Now, I did say earlier.
Mud wrestling.
I said earlier, I think everybody in the movie does an incredible job. But, look, somebody's got to be better than somebody else. And I like Vic. I think Vic really nailed it.
Yeah, I agree. He's
Carl Urban, if you would like to come on, Terry will
Terry,
trim your toenails.
We won't talk about what Terry will do for that. I'm sorry, where was I?
We were wrapping things up before you...
Sorry, I have to fan my face right now.
We'll have to pass her ShamWow.
Well, Mark, again, thank you so much for joining us. And for our listeners, Marc Cushman is the author of These Are the Voyages, parts 1, 2, and 3. Part 1 is already out, as is the revamped version. You can get at Amazon, of course, go to gntshow.com and you can click on it there. Book 2 is due out in early spring of 2014, and we will hopefully be able to talk to you after the release of that book.
I'd love to. And we'll talk in Vegas too, but let's do this before then.
That sounds great.
Looking forward to it.
It's always such a pleasure, and I mean that. I don't mean that with a lot of our guests, Date and Ward, but
Mike, are you going to ask some questions next time?
I certainly hope so. Hopefully I'll get over my shyness.
And you have a Klingon flag hanging. Never mind.
Never.
You're no.
I got a story for you. I think it's in book 2. Maybe it's in book 1 and you read it. But Dorothy Fontana, when I interviewed her, she said none of them ever liked the name Klingon. Gene Kuhn came up with it, and they didn't like it. Well, they love it now, but at that time, it sounded a little funny to them. And she went up to Gene Kuhn one day and she said, "Oh, Gene," and he says, "Yes, Dorothy." And she says, "So, Gene, these Klingons that you just came up with, what planet are they from?" And she said, without missing a beat, he looked at her and he said, "Oh, from the planet Kling."
Awesome.
Like, you realize I'm going to torture you with that knowledge now, right?
Oh, great.
It just became canon.
It doesn't sound as macho as you want it to, does it?
Sadly,
I'm from the planet Kling.
There's no Romulus, I'll say that.
Oh, brother. Well, again, thank you for joining us, and we'll tie things up now, and we'll have you back soon. And it was
have a great holiday.
Just a blast. And yes, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. The all-encompassing.
And Happy Holidays on the planet Kling, Michael.
It's Klingmas, isn't it? Isn't that what it is, Mike?
No, it's Christmas.
Is it?
Humans they stole everything from us.
You've never experienced Festivus unless you've experienced it in the original Klingon.
That's right. I love it.
Thanks a lot, y'all. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
GNT Show is a Busy Little Beaver production.
Music for the GNT Show is provided by Warp 11, Grethor, 5 Year Mission, and Andrew Allen's Smooth Federation.